When I was a kid, I would watch Lion King as some form of comfort. It's probably my favorite movie back when I started to gain object permanence, and it's a movie that, up until a few hours before this writing, I haven't watched in a long time. I couldn't remember the small details in the film like dialogue and minor plot points. However, I still can remember the big set pieces that made it so iconic. Of course, I still remember the characters, the comedy, the grits, the... And above all, it seems, I remember quite vividly how terrified I was as a kid whenever a certain villain is shown on screen. A certain black-maned lion. My channel has talked about villains so much that I found myself in a pigeonhole, and I seem to not be able to get out of it anytime soon, but I enjoy these characters a lot more than the heroes most of the time. And my fascination could be traced back to the villain that literally gave me nightmares as a wee lad. The villain that, until now, is the first character I think of whenever people mention classic Disney evil. I'm talking about, of course, the usurper of the throne, Scar. There is a certain art when making the villain, especially with animated media, a form of media that I am absolutely enamored with. May they be a broken paragon, a sympathetic lost puppy, or just a straight up maniacal fiend. And in my opinion, in the museum of iconic villains, Scar is a magnum opus framed in gold and protected 24/7 with lasers and turrets. I love Scar, and whatever I write in this video cannot capture my fondness with this deviant. And I believe this sentiment is shared with everyone who watched Lion King, the 1994 one, not this hemorrhoid that Disney decided to give the world. Scar is one of the most defining Disney, or dare I say, animated villain. He is that kind of evil that pokes at our morbid curiosity, his maliciousness displayed on screen, hard to look at, but even more difficult to ignore. Like a volcano erupting next to your city. It's violently brutal, but the kids can't help but clap at the bright lights. He is also that type of bastard that you cannot help but adore because he is so damn charismatic and practically a more fun character to follow than the main characters. Scar is just him. He, to me, is what made Lion King such an iconic movie that people up to this day still reference. From his one-liners down to his conniving schemes, they all left a mark in pop culture, a scar if you may. So in this video, let's try to break down why Scar is that once-in-a-generation villain. If you've seen my previous videos, I hold the introduction of a character in very high regard, doubly so for a villain as the way the main antagonistic force is introduced can indicate whether they are worth watching or not. Of course, never judge a book by its cover and all that, but you should probably judge it with its opening line. And Scar's opening line, delivered with the voice of the great Jeremy Irons, reveals to us immediately the tragedy that plagues this character, a tragedy that fueled every single malicious act he did in the movie. Because in the Pride Lands, there ruled a royal family of lions, and on top of that hierarchy was Mufasa, the king. He was strong and brave, and his rule was all in all favorable to his subjects. He was adored and respected by all, which is the complete opposite reception to that of his brother. For you see, Mufasa wasn't the sole son of the old king of Pride Rock. He had another prince, though he was far skinnier, far weaker, far more cowardly than his brother. He was basically the runt of the litter, an outcast from birth. In his words, he was not gifted the strength that was present in their gene pool. However, he was blessed with the brains, and, well, he did use it in his own way. In a few minutes, the dynamic between Scar and Mufasa has been established, presented to us partly with humor and intensity. From his introduction, we get to see Scar's character, very well spoken with his British accent, every line of dialogue laced with bitterness and veiled in thick sarcasm. I think his way of speaking is what gave him such appeal, because in that whole scene, true words alone, we feel that he is the one in control. With a calm demeanor, he replied sharply, even when he was confronted by the obviously stronger Mufasa. Scar shut down his show of dominance with well-placed retorts. This is not even including his whole Shakespearean monologue with the mouse he captured the very first time we see him on screen. He literally just trauma dumped to the mouse before attempting to eat it whole, which actually sums up his whole shtick. I also love the fact that he was such a drama queen, intentionally missing the ceremony, covering up his frustration that Simba would be the king instead of him, with snarky remarks against Mufasa and the cub, and taking it out on poor old Rowan Atkinson. All in all, I love Scar's introduction. It was everything we needed to know about his character wrapped in a neat bow. We got to know his personality, the spicy chemistry between him and the other characters, his motivation for villainy, and above all, what devilish deeds he and that beautiful brain of his are capable of. All of this was also elevated with the way he is designed. I love the contrast he has with Mufasa, where the king is bulkier with bright flowing red mane, Scar is scrawnier, leaner with less meat on his bones, his eyes an evil shade of green, his mane and fur darker and more rugged with a goatee that screams, "Yes, I am a bastard." And of course, we have to mention his most defining feature, the scar that runs down his left eye. To the question of where he got the scar, there are different stories, from saving Mufasa from an attack to being bit by a snake, but I think not knowing the true origins of his scar adds another layer of mystery to him, making him a more intriguing character. Of course, there is a lot more to Scar than just an aura-farming, cool-looking villain, as he was, to me, the most impactful character that shaped the story to what it is. I think it goes uncontended that Scar is by far the most important piece of Lion King. He is the main source of conflict. Everything that occurred in the movie is due to his actions. We know that his main tragedy is that he is snubbed from becoming the king of Pride Rock because Simba is next in line. However, what made him fun are the actions he took to screw over the status quo. In the beginning, Simba saw Scar as his cool, somewhat zesty uncle. He had no hints of animosity towards the black-maned lion, and he treated him as family. Oblivious to his uncle's plight, Simba blabbers on about how he can't wait to be king, something that Scar finds utterly insufferable. Still, he didn't lash out outwardly towards the cub. Instead, he again puts a facade and replies with sarcasm, which I found very enjoyable. However, beyond the snide remarks as he feigned care and protectiveness for Simba, Scar was slowly enacting his dastardly plan. Playing to his nephew's curiosity and naivety, Scar hints that beyond the Pride Lands lies a place that only the bravest lions could go, making the cub promise not to go there. This, however, just spurred the cub on as he paid no heed to his uncle's warnings and rushed headfirst towards the elephant graveyard, all according to Keiki. For over there lies the secondary antagonists of the film, these three crackheads. I honestly couldn't remember their names except for Ed here because I love him with all my heart, and he's probably what the workers in my brain looks like. These three hyenas heckled, then proceeded to attack Simba and his friends, pushing them to a corner and were certain to become pickings for the hungry junkies, if not for Mufasa coming in and fending them off. Scared by the alpha lion, the crackheads ran off licking their wounds as the lions headed back to the Pride Lands. Observing from afar though was Scar, disappointment coursing through his expression. We later get to see him paying the crackheads a visit, throwing them a zebra leg, although noting that they didn't deserve it as they didn't get the job of murdering the cubs done. This leads to quite possibly my favorite Disney musical number, and it's quite alarming that it's basically about regicide. His villain song cemented Scar's aura, singing about how he would not only overthrow the current monarchy, he proposed he would do it in brutal fashion as well. Silently, beyond the reach of Mufasa's vision, he rallied an army of crackheads to his cause, promising them that they will never grow hungry again under his rule. This entire scene showed in full display Scar's diabolical nature. And the scene that followed this broke the limits entirely. I don't care if you are a kid or an adult. This scene should be familiar to you one way or another. Scar got Simba to follow him to a gorge, saying that Mufasa has a surprise for the cub, a surprise to die for. After leaving the cub by his lonesome, Scar enacted his plan, initiating a stampede of wildebeests. A deluge of these animals came careening down the gorge where Simba is. Feigning panic and concern, Scar ran to Mufasa, saying that Simba's life was in danger. Together they ran down the gorge, Mufasa bravely diving into the stampede, being battered along the way to save his son. Desperately, he tried to fight the currents. Though he did manage to carry Simba to higher ground, Mufasa struggled to climb up, his grip failing him just before the cliff. Scar loomed over his brother, his desperate calls going out to him, calling for help. I believe I don't need to tell you what happened after.
Long live the king.
Those words traumatized every child that watched this all those years ago. Words that to this day are synonymous to letting a person fall off a cliffside. Scar was successful in his ploy to murder the king. This broke Simba, a young cub that still doesn't have the capacity to comprehend death. Scar planned to take both of them down. However, this was a close consolation. The prince, shattered and broken from his father's demise, with no time to process everything, was confronted by Scar. Though he consoled the cub, he also placed the blame on him, guilting him that all of this was his fault. He warned him to never return to the Pride Lands, that he should run away. When Simba did so, Scar ordered for his execution. In the history of great villains, especially in what is commonly considered as children's media, Scar was a ballsy depiction of grim reality, of diabolical malice. That scene was what made him one of the most iconic villains. His capacity for deception, his ruthlessness, his cold heart towards others, his selfishness manifests. As I mentioned in my other videos, I miss when villains get things done. Scar was not a passive character that let the action come to him. He was the instigator of conflict. He was a force that made consequences. He was a villain that got shit done. After exiling Simba, he ruled over the Pride Lands, successfully usurping the throne and placing himself as king. No one contested it. Not only because he had the blood rights, but also because of the army of crackheads he had at his beck and call. Scar had a lasting effect in the story. While Simba was out in the jungle vibing with Ornstein and Smo, hakunoing his cousins Matatas and neglecting his responsibilities, the king led his kingdom for his own selfish gains, destroying the ecosystem by overhunting prey, leaving nothing to his subjects, not even to the crackheads. With no one to defy him, he ruled uncontested. However, even with all this power, the mention of Mufasa still angered him. Years of living in his brother's shadow, Scar has yet to get over his insecurity, putting to death anyone who even thought about Mufasa. It was his time. It was his kingdom. But beneath that mask of power still lies the same coward. For after Simba tripped and talked to his dead dad, he returned to contest the throne, to claim what is rightfully his. Simba, now a grown lion, inheriting his father's strength and bravery, terrified Scar, as he knew he was no match to him physically. So he did what he did best, trying to slither away with his words and manipulation, blaming Simba for Mufasa's death in front of his family, blaming the crackheads for the state of the Pride Land, trying to sway the situation back to his favor. And in the crack he formed from his gaslighting, like the self-respecting Disney villain he is, Scar monologued and rage-baited, telling Simba he was his father's murderer. That was his downfall, his hubris, for it enraged Simba so much the tide of the battle returned to him. However, from the chaos of the battlefield, Scar tried to scurry away, using every underhanded tactic in the book to gain the upper hand. However, it was not enough, for in the end, his own pride was what took him to his grave, becoming food for the crackheads. Scar is the quintessential Disney villain, a sharp mind built for malice paired with a terrifying proficiency in accomplishing his goals. He is so fun to watch, whether it be him dominating the heroes or him breaking down from being pushed to the ropes. He is just that entertaining, something that a lot of modern Disney villains have missed. Looking at you, Magnifico. Scar is an iconic villain, made possible through his design, his voice, his impact, and above all, his menace. So yeah, I want to yap some more on why he's so beloved, but I think I've said my piece for now. Subscribe if you want more inconsistent uploads and be part of the conversation down in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.